To the Black girl who is hiding, but desperately wants to be seen, I see you. Hey, it's Kaylin, a licensed clinical social worker and therapist in Atlanta, Georgia, and this is the Black Girl Scene podcast. Hi, welcome to the first episode of the official Black Girl Scene podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. Okay, let's get into it. So I want to open each episode with a reflective question to get us into the mindset of the topic of the day. And for the first episode, I'm asking us, how are you allowing yourself to be seen in this season of your life? I know for me, I'm allowing myself to be seen by finally stepping out and doing this podcast. I've been wanting to do it for so long, and it's really scary. It's really scary to try something new, to put it out in the world, not knowing exactly how it will be received. But it felt really important to me that I share more and that I create this space for us to grow together. So here I am doing the scary thing, and I hope you're doing something scary too. And speaking of scary, that's exactly what this episode is about. It's about why we hide and why being seen is the path to the healing we want most. So let's get into it. So if you haven't kind of connected those dots by now, being seen is about vulnerability, right? This isn't new. There's so much gorgeous conversation out there about living the soft life, being soft, being open. And this podcast, to me, I think it's like a workshop on how to make that practical. We talk about vulnerability, but we don't always know exactly what that looks like. Or we might even say some of the things that we've come to understand our vulnerability, like setting boundaries, speaking up, taking up space. And I really appreciate when we get to make that really practical and really personal, because that's when I think we can actually make it real for ourselves. So if I had to summarize who this podcast is for and why it's going to be helpful to you, I would say this is for those of us who just don't feel like you're getting your needs met in relationships and in life. If you very regularly feel like you're disconnected from yourself, disconnected from others, feel empty and like you don't get what you need or what you want, you might relate to the idea of feeling unseen. That experience of disconnection, that's a really powerful gap between where you are and where you want to be. And that can be true for personal growth, for emotional healing, for your relationships, for your career, all of it. That gap often is what takes us to the therapist's office, what gets us into the journal, what gets us to this space where we're wondering, what's going on and how do I change this? I also think this is really important for those of us who maybe we're used to functioning pretty okay. We tend to make things work. We show up for people. We have relationships, but we ourselves still feel pretty empty, right? The accomplishments didn't fill the gap, didn't fill the hole. Maybe the marriage, maybe the apology, even all these things that we thought were going to help us feel whole didn't. And so if that's you, welcome, and I see you. And this is going to be the space where we explore how we can close that gap. And so that means talking a lot about vulnerability, softness, openness, and of course, being seen. I think it's really important to also contextualize, like, what are we talking about when we talk about vulnerability, when we talk about being seen? Because again, trendy words, important words, definitely not new, but definitely something that we don't always give some good weight to understand what we're really referring to. So for me, vulnerability is the practice of opening yourself up and sharing your inner world. It is a risk. It's often uncomfortable, sometimes very uncomfortable, and it often involves uncertainty. I think even though we can be vulnerable in safe spaces, I think there's still always this piece of, I don't know what's going to happen after I do this. And I think that's a part of what makes a practice vulnerable. It's funny, when I was researching vulnerability, to kind of think like, what else do people, say to define this? All of the definitions, almost all the definitions that came up first said some version of weakness, or, they talked about some type of threat to a system. It was all so negative. And I recognize, dictionary wise, that word is connected to the idea that like, oh, there's a vulnerability in the tech system or something like that. And I think that's true in psychology, in mental health, in the relational world, that we associate vulnerability with a weakness. But when you think about the fact that vulnerability really is so scary, and there's often a fear that if you open up, you will let in something bad, but there are people who bravely do it anyway. Vulnerability is a strength, right? And so with that fear that you'll let something bad in, it's so important to remember that that opening is where you allow in the quote unquote good, right? So I don't love using good and bad, but I think here it's important to just kind of just say it. Some things just don't feel good, and we're afraid of letting that in. And some things do feel good, and those are the things we want, but we can't let them in because we're so closed off and protected. And so that intimacy, the closeness, the support, the love, the forgiveness, those things that we tend to seek, they have to go through the door of vulnerability. And so how that connects to being seen is, being seen, in my opinion, is it's a result. It's an experience that we have as a result of practicing vulnerability. You feel seen when you do anything that creates an opening into your inner world, and there's a witness who has the capacity to see you, right? So you practice the vulnerability, and there's someone there who can hold that. And guess what? That doesn't always mean it's another person. Sometimes it's you. Right? I think that's why self intimacy exists, and that's why it's so powerful. And so it's often the experience we crave the most, especially when we learned to mask or hide in order to feel safe. And so I hope this is all connecting to you, that we hide because we've been hurt. We hide because we are experiencing a lot of fear and risk. And sometimes we've even been taught to hide because we haven't been allowed to be seen. There are so many ways that hiding protects us from the things that we fear when it comes to vulnerability. But it's also important to know that vulnerability helps us heal because it actually allows us to do the things that lead to healing, processing our emotions, releasing things that don't serve us anymore, allowing love and support, right? How can we feel loved if others cannot know us enough to love us? How can, and notice I said feel love, not be loved. That's important too. We'll probably talk about that in another episode, because I think it's so easy to start saying, oh, well, you can't be loved unless you love yourself first. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. But again, this is an experience. So we can be seen and not feel seen. We can be loved and not feel loved. And I think feeling love is actually more important than being loved. Again, we'll get into that in another episode. So, and again, so how can we see our dreams come true if we're too afraid to take big risks and leaps? Right? How do we let go of the past if we never want to look at it in the first place? All of these things take vulnerability, and all of these things shift when we allow ourselves to be seen. We finally open the door to that. So again, with that, if practicing vulnerability is so important and it's such a clear path towards what we want, why do we hide? It's scary. It's risky. It's not something we were taught to do, encouraged to do, allowed to do. We've all been hurt, and some of us maybe have experienced hurt at deeper levels. maybe experienced hurt in multiple layers. As a social worker, I talk a lot about ecosystems of care and community. And as Black women and as women who hold many intersecting identities, we've been hurt in a lot of ways by a lot of systems. And so it's often a survival piece along with an interpersonal and like a learned thing, that hiding is a tool to protect ourselves against more hurt. And it helps to protect us against shame and rejection and so many of the painful experiences we're familiar with. The biggest problem with this is that we think hiding keeps us completely safe, when in reality, it actually keeps us comfortable. So safety and comfort are not the same. And I want to name that in some ways, hiding and protective strategies keep us safe to an extent. It can stave off certain harms, mostly physical harm, when you're a child. And again, I'm going to get in future episodes into where we learn this from, what this looks like in childhood, attachment styles, all that really cool therapy science stuff. And I think it's important in it because I think it would be harmful to tell you that, oh, a protective strategy doesn't keep you safe. It does to an extent. I think when it comes down to the safety that we need to heal, it only goes so far. And I'll give you an example. We can think, okay, if I don't open my heart, no one can hurt us. So we are safe from heartbreak. However, we might still be in relationship with people who hurt us anyway. Right? So we may not have to navigate the full level of discomfort that we feel with fully opening our heart, right? Comfort seeking. But we're not actually experiencing safety because we're not connecting. We can't be our authentic selves. We can't trust the person. We're just defended and protected all the time. So that's more of what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the fact that if you choose not to say certain things online to protect your job, that you're not keeping yourself safe. You are absolutely keeping yourself safe from certain forms of harm. And could another form of that level of safety seeking be that you are working in community to get another job if that's feasible for you so that you don't have to do that? And again, layers on layers on layers. I really wanted to, however, contextualize what I mean, because there are forms of safety seeking that are in our hands that we don't always empower ourselves to create because hiding feels more comfortable. And that's more of the space that I want us to kind of work through and talk through as we talk about practicing vulnerability and being seen. The biggest problem with hiding is that we think hiding can stop the bad things from happening, right? And the reality is we can seek safety, and sometimes the way we hide and protect ourselves keeps us safe, maybe on a survival level, on a physical level. It can protect us in some ways, but it doesn't necessarily set us up for what we really need to experience the level of emotional and psychological safety that we desire, as well as, quote unquote, the good stuff, the intimacy, the connection, the trust. In some ways, our protective tools are important, and there are a lot of ways that we're using protective tools that we don't need anymore. There are protective tools that we had when we were kids and we couldn't protect ourselves at all. And so we reached for what was closest to us. But now we're using it in a way that actually keeps us hidden. It keeps us disconnected from what we really need. And it's our job now to renegotiate the tools we use to keep ourselves safe so that we can actually be open enough to get everything that we need. So what does this look like? Hiding and feeling unseen can look a lot of different ways. I think one of the biggest ways is you feel invisible, right? You literally feel like people don't see you, people don't notice you, people don't acknowledge you. You might feel stuck, which in our next episode, we'll get into an experience of feeling stuck can really be a big telltale sign that you are disconnected from yourself and your needs and your wants. And so there's a lot of standing still. You feel alone. And again, you can feel alone without being alone. So again, I think that experience of feeling alone is really significant here. You can be in a room full of people. You can be in a whole marriage. You can have a whole best friend and feel alone, right? You might feel misunderstood and like no one gets you. You might struggle a lot with guilt. You might notice that you take on the onus and the responsibility of a lot of things and tend to just feel bad and then sometimes feel guilty about feeling bad. You might struggle with low self-esteem, or you are feeling burned out. You're feeling uninspired, right? You also could be using work as a coping strategy, feeling numb, empty. And one that I don't think we always talk about is you fantasize about a whole new you and a whole new life, right? There's this escapism, this need to be completely different in order to feel something, to be something. Those are some really big signs that you're feeling unseen in your life. And I want to make space for all of these and much more moving forward. And so being seen can really be the door to shift this for you. It's the door to feeling what I'm confident you're craving, which is being visible, acknowledged, like you and your opinions matter, understood, considered, included, valued, trusted, celebrated, loved, all of that and so much more. And being seen can look like a lot of things. It can be really deep and it can also be really surface level and we don't realize how deep it is. So being seen can look like slowing down and resting more. There's nothing more vulnerable than someone who has learned that what they do is their identity, that performance is tied to their worth, and then they're finally learning how to rest. Top 10 most vulnerable things you can do. It can look like confronting past trauma. It can look like confronting old wounds. It can look like opening your heart after heartbreak, like setting boundaries, right? Like going no contact with family. It can also look like forgiving and repairing relationships with safe people. It can look like moving or relocating, starting fresh. It can also look like choosing to return home. It can look like choosing to stay somewhere. It can even look like adding more color to your closet, changing up your look, speaking up for yourself, getting comfortable with silence or stillness. It can be anything. So there's so many ways we can start to practice vulnerability and allowing ourselves to be seen in ways that can really help us move the needle toward the life we desire and a life we'll love. And that's the journey I want to invite you to join me on. So this space, like I said, it's going to be a workshop to understanding the ways we show up in relationships, the stories we've propped up as ideas of who we are and what's possible for us, which are often limiting, and learning to be brave enough to ask ourselves, does it have to be this way? Could there be more? What happens if I let myself be seen? So I kind of want to close this podcast with a practice, and I definitely want to have nice takeaways in a lot of the episodes. Not too much though, because I don't want to get into this control space where it's like, well, tell me how to fix it. Can't fix what you have to feel through, right? But I do want us to have actual practices to use that we can feel through these things with. So today I want to invite you to journal or reflect about the ways that you think you're hiding and the ways that you could start to be seen. For some of us, that might be really easy to answer. And some of us, it might take some time. And I just want to invite you to spend time on this and don't rush through it. See what comes up and keep coming back to this space and see what we can start to work through. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited for what's to come. I'm going to have guests in the future. I'm going to open up a space for Q&A so that I can hear more from the listeners about what you have to share, what you want to hear about. And I want to deep dive into all things vulnerability, softness, and being seen. especially for the Black girls out there. I'm also excited to share more about myself. While I love being deep and I could talk about feelings and healing all day, I'm also on this journey right here with you. Every day I'm living this and I'm learning this, and I am laughing. I am being silly and unserious. I'm dancing in the mirror. I'm crying in the car, a little crush out here and there, everything in between, just like you. So thank you so much for being here and seeing me. And I can't wait for this to unfold for both of us on this journey, or all of us. If you liked this episode, subscribe, like, share it with a friend. And remember, to the Black girl who is ready to be seen, I see you. Thanks for tuning in to the Black Girl Scene podcast. This podcast is meant for information purposes only and is not meant to substitute for medical advice. Although I'm a licensed therapist, this podcast does not establish a clinical relationship with you, the listener, nor does it replace a relationship with a licensed mental health professional. For more information and resources on finding a therapist or support, please visit www.blackgirlscene.com/support.